issues in philosophy of language, the status of proper names has puzzled philosophers ever since the days of Plato. In answering the question whether or not proper names has meaning, philosophers advanced different theories and argued with each other. A valuable example was the debate between Thoreau's description theory and Clipper's causal theory. To a large extent, this debate represents popular understanding of names as well as the basic divergence of name will. Consequently, many later studies on names are closely related to these two theories. Here, I want to express my comprehension of names in virtue of a change to the above question. My thesis is, rather than simply asking whether or not proper names has meaning, we may question under what philosophical, pragmatic, and social cultural conditions proper names have meaning. Because along with different backgrounds and purposes, people can take different examples to support as well as reject the same will. Furthermore, if it is true that cultures vary in their attitude to word play, then absolutism is not valid to solve the name puzzle. I shall explain my thesis in terms of the following three aspects. First, the right of naming. Second, semantic content. Third, pragmatic transformation. By the right of naming, I mean the customer of naming the thing. And behind a customer, there are always some rules and beliefs that determine the features of the customer. Then, how does a name come up, or how is the thing named? When philosophers ask this question, they are actually talking about either a name possesses a certain science associated with the barrier of the name, or the name is nothing but a given tool picking out the barrier of the name. According to according to his causal theory, a person is initially named by his parents. They talk about him to their friends. Other people meet him. Through various sorts of talk, the name is spread from link to link, as if by a chain. The key point here is that naming itself is arbitrary. A name is a rigid designator, and to use the name is to denote the barrier of the name, which has nothing to do with the attributes of the named person. This theory draws a clear but also simplified picture of names. It cuts off any possible relation of a name to its reference, intention, and knowledge. In terms of this picture, a name cannot have any meaning. Is this the Western attitude toward wordplay? Namely, it doesn't matter what name is given to a thing. The person who is named John could be named Tina, Alice, or whatever. No, it is not at least the sense to some even in the ancient Greek thinkers. One passage from Plato reads that everything has a right name of its own, which comes by nature, and that a name is not just whatever people call a thing by agreement, but there is a kind of inherent correctness in names. Furthermore, whether or not proper names are appropriate, there is certainly a question which still preoccupies many modern parents when choosing names for their children, and ensures a steady sale for books. I don't know how many Western parents ask this question when choosing names for their children, but I do know that most, if not all, Chinese parents are very careful in naming their children. They make decisions in terms of some factors such as family tradition, political and regional environment, as well as expectations of children's future. To believe names have a meaning and to link names with meaning is a cultural tradition that has lasted for more than 2,000 years in China. For Chinese people, Confucius' idea expresses their theory of names. That is, if names are not rectified, then language will not be in accord with truth. If language is not in accord with truth, then things cannot be accomplished. We cannot determine what words we play with, for language is a given system for a generation. Let's think about Saussure and Gadamer's theories of language. Yet, how to play with words is up to us. For language has the potential to serve different purposes. Let's think about Wittgenstein's theory of linguistic game. If the way a name relates to a thing varies from a situation to situation in which the name is used, then the relation itself is established and fixed, since naming is done. So whether or not a name has meaning and what the meaning of the name is depends on the purpose and the design of naming. The scope of the purpose and the design is the scope of a name's function. Whether a name functions is where a name functions is where the name makes sense. According to the causal theory, naming is an arbitrary action. It doesn't need any purpose and design. But according to Plato and the Chinese tradition, naming is a rational behavior since it gives a sense to a name by encoding certain meaning into that name. In other words, names reflect people's, especially name makers' understanding of their relation to the barriers of names. It seems that Crips adopted the baptism to deny the meaning of names. He mixed two things up, which has relations with each other but can still be and should be distinguished. Namely, he replaced the internal content of names with the external circulation of names. In doing so, he drove out not only the rational element of naming, but the semantic content of names. Here, semantic content means not only the experience or state of the barrier of a name in reality, but the sense or significance of the name itself in mind. In talking about semantic content, some philosophers often refer to the descriptions of a name, namely, the meaning of a name is embedded in the descriptions of the barrier of the name. This seems not to include all kinds of semantic content. According to Frege, a proper name can express its sense, which is a psychological projection of its reference, but not the reference itself. Though his idea gave meaning to names, he didn't put meaning in an independent state, for his sense has to rest on references. Under these conditions, his semantic theory of name sense was not greatly different from Wittgenstein's ontological theory of name sense. In order to answer whether or not names has meaning, and if they do, in what way they have a meaning, we need first look at the names themselves. In this regard, Chinese culture can provide a lot of examples because Chinese names has rich semantic content. Probably one may read, by taking an example from a very famous Chinese novel. I just want to try to demonstrate that at least for Chinese tradition, people do believe proper names has meaning. And from that example, I will try to make 3 points. First, the boundary line between the common name and the proper name is not unchangeable. a common name can be used as a proper name. Second, we can only correctly judge a name and its meaning when we are sure in what situation the name is used or discussed. Third, a proper name can have a meaning even when its meaning doesn't relate to the buyer's experience or state. Probably one may reject my approach, especially the third one, arguing that if a name has nothing to do with the buyer's experience or state, that means the function of a name is but to denote the buyer, and the name itself has no meaning at all. I would answer that whether or not a name has meaning depends on whether or not a name has a relationship to its buyer in addition to denoting the buyer. For example, in order to denote space shuttles, people could just name them with numbers, letters, or the combination of numbers and letters like the license plates of vehicles. Yet, they named space shuttles with Challenger, Discover. Undoubtedly, these names imply people's purpose and wish, which amount to the very meaning of these names. Philosophical studies of proper names often focus on the semantic nature of proper names as a steady science, but proper names are also coins in the busy give and take talk. Then, under different talk situations with different pragmatic purposes, could a name always keep the same signs? In thinking of this question, we have to take into account the different performances of a name. Otherwise, we cannot answer whether or not proper names has meaning. To understand the reasons leading to the debate on proper names, we may get some enlightenment from the following quotations. Correctly said that I want to present a better picture without giving a set of necessary and sufficient conditions for reference. Such conditions would be very complicated. On the other hand, Leons hold that there is a tendency for philosophical treatment of proper names to underestimate the racial and even magical significance of names in many cultures. It is true that names in communication are very complicated because Klipuk omitted complicated conditions. His casual picture was no better than descriptive picture, and what is underestimated by philosophical treatments is more than what Leons mentioned. The underestimated names become a great challenge to those philosophers who deny the meaning of proper names. To sum up, I don't agree with the casual theory because in some cases, and especially in some cultures, proper names do have a meaning. I also don't agree with the description theory because it narrows the semantic content of proper names. Well, some philosophers don't believe names has meaning. I'm concerned with this case that if the popular belief that names has meaning is simply wrong, it is nevertheless widespread in many civilizations. Under this condition, I have to ask whether should we examine those civilizations which believe names have meaning in terms of the theories of scholars who don't believe names have meanings, or should we evaluate the meaning in terms of these civilizations? Thank you very much.